Thank you again for attending. I really appreciate your support and being here. Again, if you're catching this on YouTube, you can always join us live and be a part of the conversation, 3 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Fridays. And with that, we're going to go ahead and kick off today's episode. And today's episode is what I'm going to call, You're Doing It Wrong. I like the picture here. It's one of the added memes I had for the day. Facebook, You're Doing It Wrong. And what am I talking about today is going to be 3 different things. So number one, when it comes to food holding, Hatco is a company that holds hot food hot. So what we call it is retarding the cooling process. Step 2, or topic 2 in the talk, is going to be some heat is better than none, true or false, and then microwave madness. So to begin, let's talk about some of the biggest pet peeves that we have if you were to ask any of the regionals here at Hatco. And the number one thing we have to remember is that Hatco units are designed to keep hot food hot, okay? So what we're doing is simply slowing down the process in which the food is from a temperature to a cooler temperature that's no longer safe, okay? We don't have the wattage associated with a lot of these units in order to do what's called rethermalization. Now, some of those units that we have, such as the CHW, or the Cook and Hold Well, is a countertop product that we offer that does have the capabilities, but we put it right in the name of the unit so that you know that you can rethermalize product. One of the biggest issues that we see is people placing product on one of our pieces of equipment at a temperature that's lower than desired, and then because they think the unit is set at 170 or 180 degrees, that the unit is going to be able to bring that food back up to temperature, and that's not the case. You end up having food that temps lower than it needs to be, and especially if you get below 140, you're going to have some major issues. So we need to make sure that we're placing hot food onto a merchandiser, onto a heated shelf, onto one of our cabinets. That's going to be one of the biggest issues that we see whenever we get a troubleshooting phone call that a particular unit isn't holding to temperature correctly. So let's talk about some of the guidelines here. Now, I'm going to stop sharing for a second because you got to see me here. Has anybody actually read the food code from the FDA? It's 767 pages long. And I'll have you know, you can thank me later. In quarantine, I've read 768 of them. That was one extra blank page at the end. So the next time I get to see you out of quarantine, you can buy me a beer or possibly a mixed drink. So let's get back in here to the screen share. The food code. After reading all 768 pages, what I've actually found is 3 main things that you need to worry about. So number 1, cook the food to greater than 165 degrees Fahrenheit in order to kill any of the bacteria that's in it. Now, we put a star there because sous vide cooking is a little bit different, so we're not going to talk about that today. 165 or above kills the bacteria. Number 2, hold between 140 degrees and 160 degrees. And then last but not least, there is a 4-hour max hold time between 41 degrees Fahrenheit and 135 degrees Fahrenheit. And I know everybody's sitting here going, Ryan, we know that, all right? We've been in the industry for a long time. But I would challenge you right now to go into several operations that are close by and watch how often you have food that goes in that is not at the correct temperature. Something as simple as taking food products out of an oven and then letting it sit for 10 minutes before it's finally wrapped and then placed into the holding unit itself could be the difference between going in at 160 degrees or 140 degrees even and going in at 130 and expecting the unit to then bring that back up. That's where you're going to have some major issues. Here's a picture, and this is right from the Hatco website, okay? Now, a lot of people are going to look at this and go, well, what's wrong with it, Ryan? It's fantastic. In fact, it's on the Hatco website. Well, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it per se, but if I were to ask most of you, you will see that there's 2 plates that are placed on this unit. And I would say 80% or higher, that is a cold plate. You've now taken hot food and you've placed it on a cold plate and you've now placed it on a hot stone, and within 10 or 15 minutes, those egg rolls or whatever else you have put on there is probably going to be coming down in temperature rather quickly. and it's not going to do the job that it's intended to. As you can see in the other parts of the picture, the food can go directly on those products. It is a food safe material. So this is one of my biggest pet peeves. And in fact, actually, we saw this at some of the Hatco schools where at the Stone Harbor, they were placing cold platters of food. And even with some overhead heat, that food is really not going to hold for very long because you're putting it directly onto a cold surface. So I know everybody knows the guidelines and rules, but I thought I'd state them again for fun. But I know we've seen issues like this all over. And if we avoid these, you're going to get better hold times and you're going to get better food quality. Now, that brings me to the next issue. And there's a phrase that a lot of people have heard before that, well, some heat is better than no heat. And what we found is that is actually a myth. And it is actually stated that bacterial growth is more rapid at 105 degrees than it is at room temperature. So remembering to maintain 140 or above for holding is ideal. Otherwise, room temperature seems to be the better option in terms of bacterial growth. Now, what happens if you have too much heat? Well, you drive moisture out of the product through a process called evaporative cooling. Think about it when you're outside and you're sweating. As the sweat becomes, or it comes on your skin, the air passes over that and you feel cooler. That's exactly what's happening with the product when too much heat is driven in, is that moisture is coming out and then you're getting some evaporative cooling. So it will actually drive down the temperature of the food. You're also going to dry out the food product. What happens if you have too little heat? Well, obviously the food stays in the danger zone for too long and you often end up with cold product. Last section of today's talk is going to be microwave madness. This is another one that we see all the time when we get phone calls about merchandisers or other products that aren't holding properly, and it has a lot to do with microwavable frozen product. Now, I must preface this by saying I have nothing against frozen food. I have nothing against frozen wrap sandwiches. In fact, there's a truck that comes by without saying the company's name. It rhymes with the animal swan, and they have some of the best frozen products I've ever had. In fact, the breakfast burritos and breakfast sandwiches are a mainstay at my house. So with that being said, the issue we run into is just the way the microwaves work. As the microwave comes in, it excites the water molecules, which vibrate, causing friction and heating up, and that heats the food product. Well, you have a couple of issues. Number one, when you're heating up the water molecules, you're driving a ton of water and moisture out of the actual sandwich itself. So if you've ever noticed, if you microwave something too long, you end up getting hard spots on it. This same thing happens after a sandwich is microwaved, even if it's at the right duration of microwaving. As it sits into a hot shelf, you will get dried out hard spots on it. Now, the other thing is, you have a charged energy. So that temperature, I've seen it before, where you take a frozen sandwich and you heat it up. We probe it before it goes in the merchandiser, and it temps out at 205 degrees. But within about 5 minutes, it's all the way down to 160. Because as you know, there's certain parts of the sandwich that are still cold, and there's certain parts that are piping hot. And as that heat dissipates throughout the sandwich or equalizes, the temperature naturally goes down. So just because it's at 205, as it sits, it decreases rapidly. The last problem that we see when holding frozen product out of the microwave is the fact that if it's enclosed in a wrapper, what happens to that moisture as it's escaping the product? It gets trapped inside the wrapper. And what happens to the steam as it cools down? It creates condensation. So the other problem we see is a held sandwich, although it will be in food safe temperatures, the outside gets really soggy because that water collects on the wrapper and then gets down into the actual product. If you can avoid some of these big common misconceptions or big common problems that we see, you will see a much better hold time in all of your food products with Hatco products. So with that, that's actually going to wrap up today's talk. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and we're going to open it up for conversation. Once again, to add a question, simply scroll to the bottom. You'll see the chat option. If you open it up, you can place your question right down here. And with that, go ahead and ask away. Bueller, again, Bueller. Wow, this might be an easy one. Joe, did you get any private messages, any questions that you had for the day?
I have not, and that's a bit of a surprise because this is the largest amount of participants that you've had so far.
Wow, see, hey, I appreciate that, Travis. Nailed it today. Well, with that, I'm going to give it about 30 more seconds to see if anybody else has a question, and I will throw in some housekeeping. As always, if you have a question that maybe you don't want to pose, oh, here we go. Dean Austin, when using plated food on a heated shelf, what are the considerations? Now, what I need to make sure is that the plate itself is up to temperature, so that the time that it takes from the plate being warm and getting to the same temperature as the shelf itself, that is what we're looking for. So if I take a hot plate and then I put it on there, so it almost mirrors within a few seconds, hopefully within a few minutes max, if it mirrors the same temperature as the base that it's sitting on, it's now acting as the shelf, and food can be placed on the platter if that's the aesthetic look that you're going for. Really what we have to consider is if you take an ice cold plate and place it on there, the time it takes for that plate to get up to temperature is it's gonna be way too long, and your food is gonna be cool immediately. Once again, if you do have any questions and you maybe don't want to ask them here, but you want to send us a message privately, remember our email is placedinshelter@gmail.com. We welcome any memes that you have, questions, topic ideas. I love it when we can do customer topic ideas. And without that, we're going to move into my favorite section.
So could you talk about the bottom of the plates that we recommend that you put on heated shelves? The plates, we do not want that foot, because then you're not having that direct contact. So you don't have, you need to have your plate actually touching the surface of that heated shelf for it to actually work properly. If you have a ring around your plate, it's not doing you any good because you don't have that direct contact.
I gotcha. I was confused when you said foot because I've never seen a plate with a foot before.
Feet, ring, same thing.
The ring on the bottom, I get it. A flat plate, something that's actually in full contact with the heated base, will actually help that plate get hotter faster and then give you more surface area. So perfect. With that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen one last time here. And the first one actually comes in from Joe McAuliffe. I love this one with everybody in quarantine and trying to be healthy and stay fit. In my case, drinking Bloody Marys is as close to juicing as I'll ever get. And the next one comes in from Eric Reed. And this one we really have to dissect for a second because there's a lot going on here. Eric, this was great. So relative importance in 2020 so far. Well, coffee remains the same. I think coffee is a staple in everyone's life. Car, that one hits home because I was just joking the other day. I can't remember the last time I actually drove my car. I haven't left. My wife leaves for work and she picks up groceries from the call-in whenever we need them. So I don't know if I can drive anymore. Internet's clearly gone up. Shaving, I might have the worst beard in the industry right now. Alcohol, I'm pretty sure the line is still going. I didn't have enough room to keep it on the screen. Toilet paper has died out, it seems like. It was a huge spike, and now if you go to the store, there's readily available toilet paper. Sweatpants, by all means, and that's that. So thank you, guys. Go ahead and stop share. Here comes Chase. Thank you, everybody, again, for attending today's show. Once again, attending on YouTube, if you want to be a part of the conversation, 3 p.m. Central Time, you can go ahead and join in. There's Chase. And as always, if you do subscribe to the Hatco channel, if you hit the bell notification on the bottom, it will always let you know when we post new videos. Like, share, subscribe, invite any of your customers, consultants, dealers, anybody is welcome to join in the call and participate. So until tomorrow, we'll see you later. Say bye, Chase. Say bye. Say bye. All right, we got to stop recording, buddy.